The deadly terror attack in Christchurch, New Zealand that left 50 people dead as it was live streamed on Facebook prompted the social media company to act. It has now banned white nationalist and separatist content worldwide, and here in Canada has removed several groups and individuals. Kevin Chan is head of public policy for Facebook Canada, and he joins us now on the struggle to balance freedom of expression while constraining hate speech. Kevin, good of you to come into TVO tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks very much. All right, this broke last week, and let's just hit this on the head as we start here, okay? 87 million people, including more than 600,000 Canadians, likely had their personal information harvested by the consulting firm Cambridge Analytica, we remember that, without their consent. And last week, the Privacy Commissioner of Canada rebuked you guys, saying you broke privacy laws and you still aren't complying, and they're taking you to federal court. So let's get you to respond to that before we go any further.
Sure. I mean, I think, as you're saying, this is, in fact, from what we understand from the commissioner, he intends to take this to federal court. That obviously limits what I can say to you and to your viewers today. But I would say, what I can say is that we are obviously very disappointed at where we're at. I think we have made, for many months now, efforts to try to come to a resolution. Clearly, we're not there. And so we are, it would seem, going to have to go through a different process for this. I think it's important for me to say, though, up front, that we actually have spent significant time and energy, and we've done a lot of different things, both since 2014, when we changed the platform, and since Cambridge Analytica, the story broke, to make significant changes on the platform. We care deeply about the privacy of Canadians and of users around the world.
Do you acknowledge the Privacy Commissioner has authority over you in this area?
Absolutely, they have authority.
So you do, because obviously there's a lot of speculation as to whether or not you intend to be interested in or play ball with his recommendations.
Oh, I think, as I'm trying to indicate, and I can't say more than that, but we have actually for months been working with them on trying to arrive at a resolution. Okay,
you've got this ban now in place. How's this going to work?
Well, the idea is we spent a lot of time, actually prior to New Zealand and the terrible tragedy that happened there, we actually spent a lot of time working with experts already, globally and in Canada, to understand what it means when someone says that they're a white nationalist or a white separatist. And I think you can appreciate that for the longest time, we want to make sure that we understood that this would actually be distinct from other types of nationalism or other types of separatism. And what experts have shown us, and we've kind of come to the end of our policy development process, is in fact, a white nationalist or a white separatist, that kind of perspective is actually indistinguishable from white supremacy. And that realization, in working with experts, has allowed us to then now modify our community standards to include that as part of our dangerous individuals and dangerous organizations policy. And so from now on, when people are identifying with these things, we will remove those kinds of sentiments expressed by people on the platform.
How explicit do those sentiments have to be expressed for them to be taken down?
Well, I think that comes to the question of freedom of expression, and we want to obviously preserve as much space as possible for people to express their views. And so that's very important. And so I would say to you, while we tend not to go into the operational details of how we think about these things, as you can appreciate, people may try to work around the system or game the system. I think people should be aware that we do want to strike that appropriate balance. And so it can't be, obviously, a net that is incredibly wide.
Right. So if Facebook user John Smith, for lack of a better name, decides to say, I believe in a white Canada that has only white people and no people of color, period, full stop, does that get taken down?
I don't want to give you an answer that I can't be certain of, because I'm not obviously the person who actually works on these things. But I think what you're getting at, I think, is that yes, there is going to be there needs to be a recognition of a spectrum of speech. And what we want to be doing is preserving as much space as possible while dealing with the truly obvious and clear cases of white separatism and white nationalism.
Did Facebook, I mean, this is not a new story. This kind of stuff has been, and in recent years, it has been increasing in volume and in tone. Did Facebook act quickly enough, in your view, to tackle this issue?
Well, I mean, it has been our long-standing content policy or longstanding community standards that there's no place for hate on the platform. And so in fact, if we look at other realms, like if there are terrorist organizations that are on the platform, that's prohibited and we take that down. Harassment, bullying, those sorts of things are a violation of our community standards. In this particular case, what we were looking at is going through a policy development process in consultation with experts to try to understand, is there a gap here pertaining to white nationalism and white separatism?
In Quebec, I'm told these groups are still operating on Facebook. Do you know why?
I would say to you that when we do look at the platform, we don't make distinctions between sort of different regions of the country. We would want to be able to do thorough analyses across the country.
Okay, but they're operating in French, obviously, and is it possible Facebook is just not quite as sharp in French as it is in English, and therefore some of these things are sneaking through in Quebec where they might not in the rest of the country?
No. We are a bilingual company. Well, we're multilingual. We operate in many different countries with many different languages, over 50 languages, French obviously being one of them. So that would certainly not be the case. Look, I can give you a bit more color. I can tell you we do work, as I said earlier, we do work with experts in Canada. And certainly these experts don't make a distinction between something that's in one province versus another.
Faith Goldie is a name that will be known to many people watching this program right now. She ran for mayor of Toronto in the last municipal election last October. I think actually she came third with very little participation in any of the all candidates debates because in the view of many who were putting on those debates, she is a white supremacist who utters hate speech and therefore was not included. Here's someone named Brandon Ambrosino of the Globe and Mail writing about your decision at Facebook to ban Faith Goldie from your pages. Different people will have different versions of hate. Some gay people, such as myself, might feel uncomfortable when some conservative Muslims talk about homosexuality in degrading terms, and some of us might describe such speech as hateful. Similarly, some of those same Muslims might feel that gay people are being hateful when we condemn heterosexist elements found in their traditions. But are we guilty of hate? What if several of us start a public discussion online? Is our hate then organized? Okay, the concern about how you define what constitutes hate. Can you speak to that? How do you figure that out?
Well, I think we do have policies on this. So we do talk about how, very importantly, it can't lead to real-world harm, which is fundamentally the bottom line for this, is we want to make sure that what happens, the discourse on our platform doesn't lead to real-world harm. I think beyond that, as I mentioned, we do want to talk to and engage with experts, not just in Canada, but around the world to better refine our understanding of what indeed this question of hate is. I think it's helpful to look at it in kind of three layers. So one is what is prohibited in the country in which we're operating. So there are laws in Canada in place that try to get at hate speech, and so certainly we would comply with the laws of the land. The second piece is our community standards, right? So the fact that, in fact, hateful speech is not tolerated on the platform. And so if there's a violation of our community standards, then we will remove it. But then you get to this kind of third space, which is the biggest space, which is people's voices and legitimate speech. And we do think it's important for us to be able to preserve that space as much as we can.
Is it your view that Faith Goldie, had she been allowed to stay on Facebook, would have done real-world harm?
I think when we look at removing specific individuals and specific entities, we're not looking at solely what is done on the platform or what is said on the platform. We actually do a much broader, comprehensive analysis on the person or the individual or the organization in question, including the things that they're doing offline.
Who ultimately makes the decision to take, for example, a political candidate like her down?
Well, so right now we do have something called a Content Standards Forum. It meets every few weeks, where people from various parts of Facebook come together, and we actually do try to make some decisions on these sorts of things. I think what we recognize as the platform has grown, and as you're pointing out that these issues are increasingly challenging, we think it's probably not the right thing for Facebook to be making all of these decisions. And we do want to be able to by the end of this year, actually turn over some of this very important and heavy responsibility to an external oversight board. Mark Zuckerberg, our CEO, announced this at the end of last year. We intend to have it up and running by the end of this year. And the idea is that we would have a panel of eminent global thinkers and leaders who would be on this panel, and they would be the ones that actually will make these kinds of decisions on governing speech on Facebook, deciding what stays up and what goes down.
This is one oversight board for the entire world?
It would be, well, so we have a consultation process open right now, and we welcome people's input, not just experts and people who are sort of seized with the issue because of their work, but also from regular users and regular people. But what we're looking at is trying to find something that does strike that right balance between a global body and also that can accommodate the local nuances in each country. And that is indeed one of the questions. So one of the questions we have out for consultation is, what's the right architecture, what's the right design for this global board so that we can have a set of global standards and yet be able to reflect local realities?
That sounds like a very tall order, because obviously community standards in downtown Toronto would be different from community standards in Birmingham, Alabama, not to mention Nairobi, Kenya. I mean, how do you get one group of people worldwide who could really feel the sensitivity and the nuances of all of those different examples?
I think that's a very good question.
That's why I asked.
And that's the question we have out to people. I think the thing to remember is that right now, the challenge, and I think the criticism is fair of Facebook, right? Right now, we're the ones seized with that. And that doesn't seem tenable for us in the long run. And so what we want to do is try to figure out, well, is there something that we can do to create a broader independent body that is going to be transparent in how it arrived at certain decisions, that will be able to presumably publish these decisions and potentially bind Facebook to these decisions. These things I've just talked about are all open questions that we have out there right now for consultation. We are doing also consultations with experts around the world, including in Canada, on these very questions, because we recognize that these are very challenging things. I think they're also very ambitious things, but we think that, to be quite frank, Facebook doing all of this work, I don't think is going to sit well with us over time. I also don't think it sits well with many people.
People my age understand broadcasting to be done by NBC, CNN, CBC, TVO. We have a sense about what a broadcaster is. But I appreciate that I'm not a millennial. Does Facebook consider itself a broadcaster?
So we are a platform. We are a potential, I think, fair to say, a new kind of platform. But what we give rise to is actually people's voices. So we have 24 million Canadians on Facebook. We have over 2 billion people on the platform around the world. And if you look at the content that's on Facebook, the vast majority, something along the scale of 96% of content on Facebook is actually user-generated content. It's people's voices. And so it's very important, I think, to understand that when we talk about the challenge of governing content on Facebook, it's actually more akin to how do we govern speech.
I asked the question, obviously, because if you are a broadcaster, you come under different regulations than if you're just a social media platform. Given the size of your audience, and given that obviously video is transmitted worldwide on your platform, you obviously have many qualities of a broadcaster. So do you see yourself that way?
I would say no. I mean, I think actually there are some very, very interesting academic papers and thought leadership done on this that shows that, in fact, the internet, there's almost no website now that doesn't have some audio-video capability, including your website, including the Globe and Mail's website, including someone's personal page, including your ability to live stream stuff on your own, on any platform. And so I think the question becomes, is the internet something different? There are platforms online. You can choose to do things that are audio-video, but you can also post things, just text. You can have your voice heard. And so I think in some ways, I would say this question of how do you govern content and speech online is a much more challenging one.
No question about that. It's extremely challenging because obviously while you can broadcast, you're not a broadcaster like this place is a broadcaster or CTV or CBC, for example. But I was interested when, not too long ago, Mark Zuckerberg, your head and founder, said that he was open to having government regulate Facebook.
Sure, yeah.
And that is a very different message, obviously, from what the company has been putting out for all of its past history. Can you give us, just in our last couple of minutes here, can you give us some insight into why the company has had a change of heart on that issue?
Well, I think it kind of comes from the same space of why we're talking about creating an independent oversight board. I think we recognize that as the platform has grown, and now we have over 2 billion people, as I said before, around the world, it is not something that I think we should be doing in terms of deciding all these, making decisions on all of these realms. And it's probably not a good idea for there not to be baseline rules. And so, in fact, what our CEO has called for is baseline regulations on content, on privacy, on elections, especially political ad transparency, as well as on data portability. We think that these 4 things are actually hugely important to the future of the internet, and we would welcome baseline standards on this.
Okay. Kevin, thank you for this tonight. We're not finished with you yet because we should say this is just the first of 2 conversations that we're going to have with Kevin Chan. We will see him again tomorrow for more on what Facebook Canada is doing to combat fake news in the lead up to the federal election later this year. So thanks, Kevin, and see you again tomorrow.
Thank you for having me.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.